Hey, what's up, you guys? It's a son of God named Miles and a brother to Jesus Christ. It's good to be back on here, and I know that it's been a while, but I've just been patient with, you know, the things that I feel like they are pushing me towards, just to push out and talk about. Today's gonna be something a little bit more different than the usual talks that I have had on here and everything, and basically what I wanted to do was talk about my testimony. Um, I'm recording this early before the time for it, but on the 19th of February, I will have 10 years clean from drugs, alcohol, and everything. And man, that's all thanks to God and Jesus Christ um, for really impacting my life in such a way and everything. So yeah, I wanted to talk about this, talk about some of the experiences that I did go through and what led me to what led me to the faith in what I had. It wasn't only technically just a thing within Scripture, It was a faith in a thing that I had and was believing in, and that's kind of what led to them reaching out to me in the way that they felt like they needed to. So yeah, I just hope that people who ever watches this, if this is your first time, whether you're some sort of Christian or different religion, atheist, agnostic, this is just a part of my story, and it really is. This is stuff that actually did happen to me. Um, so yeah. Um, so where should I start? I was a person who grew up as just sort of like a normal kid, but one who was into sports and everything. And I had a little bit of a talent in it and stuff. And so I felt like that was an outreach within my life growing up of something that I should be doing and everything. Um, I was kind of a straight edge type person within high school. I had a little bit of, drinking that I did, and I'd smoked like weed once when I was in high school. But I kind of stopped drinking because when I had first ever gotten sick before, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do this again. And I think I only ever did it one time when I was in high school for like a surprise 18th birthday that I had for like me and my football team, and people had set it up for me and everything. So I got into college. I went to college for sports, track and field, and football. And over time, though, within that very first freshman year, I didn't really enjoy, for some reason, sports the way of like how I did when I grew up. It seemed like it was a little bit more of a sort of like business aspect to sports. There wasn't, to me, from my experience that I had, as much as team camaraderie and just enjoyment of the sport for the sake of it, and just finding the fun in it. And so I let both of those sports go, got into like actually working out, and wanted to become a bodybuilder eventually. But over time, like I said, this was within from my freshman and sophomore year. I didn't do drugs or alcohol, anything like that. I really didn't touch it, not one time. And I had at one point had some sort of Christian, I guess you could say, beliefs, but I wasn't really like someone who was fully on in the faith. I didn't really have my doctrines or understanding set right. I was sometimes still believing in things outside of Christianity. I'd gotten introduced to it in high school, from like a former girlfriend, went to church, started really believing in it. And at the time, I actually did get baptized too. And was that the time maybe that I had really gotten to the faith? When I've thought about this subject and just kind of looking back and reflecting, because I knew I was going to make this video, to me, I feel like I wasn't really in the faith yet, and it wasn't maybe really baptized within the Holy Spirit. Um, we'll talk about maybe that experience where I truly actually did believe when we get to it. So over time, within the end of my sophomore year of college, um, I had like broken up with a girlfriend, and I was like, you know what? I feel like I didn't really get to party like how I wanted to, and like I'm like already almost halfway done with college. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna start at least. I was of age at that time. I'm gonna start like partying and drinking. So that's what I started doing. I started drinking, going out to bars and everything, going out with friends, pretty often. And the reason why it was pretty often at this point was it was the summer before junior year of college. And so I was just drinking during this time. And then I got into college for my junior year, and there was just this random day where I was with one of my friends, and it was such a weird thing actually, because all of a sudden I had a desire of like I want to get high, like I wanted to like smoke weed for some reason. And I don't remember exactly how it played out, but either like I mentioned something to him about it, and he was like, you know what, I've been feeling that same way too, and stuff. And we just made that decision out of nowhere. It was strange that day of like, let's just do it. So I did it. It was like my second time doing it. Got really, really, really high, pretty messed up, and we kind of were like, you know what, that was awesome. We had so much fun, blah blah blah, and we'll do it like once a month. And the crazy thing was that's not what actually happened. It was like first it turned to we did it the next weekend, and then we just kept on doing it every weekend. Then it turned to more often than the weekend, right? And slowly but surely for me, obviously I started becoming dependent on actually smoking weed, like I really needed it or felt like I really needed it, and it started changing me. I would say that I was, for the most part, someone who, one, I was like in the gym like crazy. I was insane with it, and for a time there I was within the gym still, but I was slowly but surely starting to get away from that, right? I wanted to be more lazy. All I really was starting to think about was just wanting to chill, smoke weed, not do much. Started getting lazy and not wanting to go to class or anything like that. And also kind of around this time period too was that I started getting into other aspects or beliefs within what I thought could have been truthful things in my life that I could apply to myself. And one of the actually like a really big one, which is kind of strange because I had recently saw a recommendation of him having some talks with some people, and I know that he's not on this type of path anymore from what I understand. It was a guy named Elliot Hulse, and he was kind of like this life type guru person on YouTube. He really liked working out, but he implemented like all these, in a sense, like new age ideals and beliefs. One was like the balancing of masculine and feminine energies within you, and different forms of like meditation and applying these things into your life and all this different stuff. And obviously reflecting back on those kind of things, it's like I idolized him, right? I had a form of idolatry for this guy of trying to listen to him. He was Uncle Elliot. That's what some people kind of referred him to. And I know that, like I said, he's changed over time, but I want to bring up the big factors that may have just played a role in my life, and I know that they caused me to be in a direction that affected me. But also it was, what's been interesting about it is you see within YouTube and stuff of people who eventually I see it pretty common, like people get into like new age things and like get into like crystals and chakras and balancing your energies and all this different stuff, and eventually I even got just like that too in my life. And the thing is that, with smoking weed and getting into all these things, this new age type stuff, and being more in a agnostic like space for me, you know. Um, it felt temporarily actually like the right thing that I should be doing. This felt actually like I felt positivity, I felt energy, all this different stuff. I felt like I was in a place where I was working out, I had such a great balance within my life, blah 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 blah. But eventually all this stuff like took a turn for the worse for me. Um like I said, I had practiced like meditative type things with balancing your chakras and kundalini meditations and all this different stuff. And let me tell you, like the awakenings that you're getting from it, like for me, I had those things where I felt like my body went into like weird, like I'm like locked up mode and I'm like vibrating and like feeling like crazy energetic stuff. Stuff was really happening, but that doesn't mean that it's obviously a good thing that's for me. So, eventually, with all this different stuff, I'm smoking weed all the time. I felt like I was kind of in a good place, blah, blah, blah. But I knew that I was changing, whether I thought it was good or not. But I realized in hindsight, this wasn't what God and Jesus wanted me to be, and obviously, this is not the way. So, I had made it to like the summer, so that junior year I'm doing all this stuff, smoking weed, blah blah blah, thinking I'm in some sort of special spiritual awakening and all these different things. And I come back home, and when I came back home, I had a former friend who was like a best friend with me. We grew up together like in high school. We even knew each other too in middle school as well. And before all that stuff had happened, we weren't really necessarily doing those things. We might have drank a little bit when I was in high school during that little phase, but he was doing some of the things that I was doing as far as, drugs and everything. And this is where, like, for me, everything had changed. I went through what I like to call, honestly, like the summer of hell. And the reason why was I can't particularly talk about a certain experience that it's personal between me, God, and Jesus, and like some of the people that I have in my personal life. I think it's not good for me to talk about it publicly, to be honest. I don't think it would make any good sense for me to talk about a particular subject, okay? But it's very, very critically important for my walk in my life and why I know that God and Jesus are real. But man, all I did was during that period was smoking weed, smoking eventually, like if we didn't, because I was like wasting all my money all of a sudden. I had like a little summer job and stuff, and all I was doing was like selling my stuff just to get money, smoking spice or K2, if anybody knows what that is. Started doing psychedelics like LSD, and I started going through some weird and strange spiritual experiences. One of them being kind of like a little bit of like a demonic experience. A lot of people just think, just because, you get high that you're having either bad trips or you're just high from like smoking. No, there's something more to it. If you know, you really do know what I'm talking about, right? And being in recovery too, it's like, you hear people talk about a little bit of these experiences too, that there was more to it than just we were only dealing with drugs. We were dealing with something spiritual as well, and people having these stories that are maybe an aspect to that, right? I went through so much toxic stuff during that time, man, and it was a summer of hell, man. It really was. And I had changed so much in just a small little window of just, I only cared about getting high, escaping reality too, of like what was going on with my life and how I felt, right? And it's trying for me, like I was trying to fill this emptiness that was in me, right? That I no longer had joy anymore, or fun, feeling fun, excitement, to get rid of somehow depression and all this different stuff, I had made that type of stuff into like my god once again. Um, Dude, it was crazy. I got a lot of stories with that stuff too, but I'm not gonna share all of that on here and everything. Um, so go through this insane summer, and I make it back to college junior year. We ended up getting like a on-campus house type thing, and it's very interesting. I had ran into like this YouTube video from some guy. I don't even remember what his name was, but he was a Christian, and he said that he had like 1 year as being a Christian, like he just got it like in January, and he had said that he had this experience, and it's very funny because it's very similar to what I had. For me, this was 10 years ago. No, more than 10 years ago, actually. 12 years ago. Happened in 2013, yeah. When I had a situation happen to me. So, this was like one of these big moments, okay? That something way bigger was going on, and I was being made aware of it. So I had been at this house that I was living in. The roommates or whatever that I had, they were upstairs on the second floor within the house, and I'd smoked weed, right, and was just chilling, listening to music, blah blah blah. I was very, very high, whatever that was. It was called, this strain was called Golden Goat, and the dude even told me like, hey, just be careful because this is like some crazy stuff. I don't know if it was maybe laced with anything or what, but it was very strong. And one thing before I preface this, don't, for anybody who's on here who wants to sit here and make excuses about it, it's not that you're just high sometimes, man. People go through some actually real experiences, and it's not that we're just tripping or that we're super high. Sometimes we do go through some crazy stuff because we've opened ourselves up by putting ourselves under the influence of something. So I wanted to preface that. So I got high. I started walking out into the kitchen. I don't even remember what I was doing. I don't know if I was going to make something to eat because I was like high or whatever. But the craziest, most strange thing had happened to me, man. All of a sudden, I felt a force, okay, that took over me, and I started just pacing back and forth. Just boom, boom, just turn around, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. I am not under any control of myself right now. Something is like physically controlling me, like as if I was like a Sims character in a video game, and you're just clicking them left and right just to go little paces back and forth for just some random reason. And I was like, what the heck is going on? I'm like conscious of this, obviously, and I'm like freaking out. Like, why am I pacing back and forth without my own control? And I can feel like somebody's like literally has control over my body. And all of a sudden, I start getting fed. Like, there was so much of it going on, but I was getting fed information, okay, of like the things that I caught out of it was like what's going on with my life now, why you've gone through this summer of hell, and like, yes, this stuff is true of like what you're going through isn't just a coincidence and all this different things, right? And I was also made to feel my sin. I was made to actually feel it, and a part of that was like the things that are within me that are sinful, and how just kind of like dark and felt like demonic and evil those things can be that are like within me, and the things that are around me. Like, it seemed like it wasn't just me though that was there, that was going on. Like I said, I'm like pacing back and forth, and all this stuff is like being said to me some way, somehow. It's so hard to explain it, but you're being fed information. one way that I've like related it before is if you've ever seen The Matrix, where Neo's getting uploaded into his consciousness of like kung fu. It's like if you can imagine that uploaded thing in your consciousness, it was like that. You were being just inserted information. This really did happen to me. And so I'm feeling all my attachments to like things with people that were like really harmful to me and that was holding me back to within my life and all this different stuff. And I felt what like pure evil was. I really felt it, and it was, I mean, you can't explain it. But it's like I can even sit here and remember what that felt like. But then all of a sudden, it was like there was, as I'm pacing back and forth, all of a sudden it was like there was a wrestling between something, between good and evil. And I was feeling this wrestling as I'm pacing back and forth, and they're like having a wrestling battle with each other. And I'm just sitting here feeling all of it at the same exact time. And what was also too crazy, I feel like this happened in hindsight now within my life. It's almost like too, I felt relationships within the future from that point that I hadn't had happen yet, but I was like shown like who they are in a weird way and what they feel like. I know that sounds really confusing and stuff, but like it was like I was given like so much stuff that was like going on with me. But at the end of it, right, it was like the good, and I ended up realizing too within it, like what I felt was that good was God, and also too within it was Jesus. I could feel their presence, right? I could feel God with Jesus within me, and I'm feeling this like spiritual battle. It was like I felt like the wrestling of the spirit versus like the flesh and stuff, and like some sort of demonic oppression. I felt both of them at the same time. It was happening, and it was insane. And dude, I felt like within this pacing back and forth, it felt like it was like literally forever. Like, I don't even know. Time seemed like it was timeless. That I was almost like caught in this spiritual warfare prison for like, I'm not even talking about like 30 minutes. It felt like years. It was very strange how this experience was. Insane. Okay? So, that happened to me. All of a sudden, like, after all this time, it stopped, right? And I was surprised that nobody could hear me because I had two roommates upstairs, and it was like I was pacing back and forth. It was like my feet were like loud. I could feel it, like how hard I was stomping on the ground. I was like, I don't even know how they didn't come downstairs. It was almost like time was frozen, and I'm like in a whole different world, whole different dimension somehow, of like, it's just a pocket space, dimensional space of something that I was in. So I know it sounds wild, but I'm trying to explain it as best as I can. Okay. This was like, I felt like this in the end was God letting me know, hey, I am real. So is my son. Here's what sin feels like. Here's what demonic oppression feels like. This is what evil also feels like as well. But this is who we are. This is how we are, our energy, or whatever you want to call it, right? So I felt good and evil at the same time. It was insane, dude. I seen a video of a kid who talked about he felt all his sin and he actually collapsed to the ground, and like there was like that physical forceness, and I guarantee that very same thing of what this dude felt was what I felt like 12 years ago. It's just very interesting what that kid talked about within the video that like literally just came out. Very, very strange, but I also don't find those things coincidences, you know? So, anyways, let's get back to the topic. I stop. I'm like, what the frick did I just go through? I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I can't believe I just went through that. I'm like, go and sit down. And I'm just like tripping after that, you know? I'm like, I just went through something that is not normal. So, after going through that experience, after going through too, like some of the weird things that I dealt with in the summer of hell that I kind of told you guys about, some serious things that are important within my walk. You know, I dealt with some demonic things during that time too. Um, but I want to fast forward time a little bit. So this actually wasn't long after that experience, you know, because that was early on this school year. That was probably like sometime in September or something like that. Well, I came back home just as a visit in October, and I am very overwhelmed clearly of that experience that I went through, all the stuff that happened in the summer that I went through, how I'm dealing with like knowing that I probably shouldn't be smoking weed, but I can't stop doing drugs, and how miserable, excuse me, how miserable I feel with everything, right? And so what I did was I talked to my parents about it. I just opened up to them about like that situation, what I felt was going on with my reality and with my life, and just like the insane things. I told them the other stories, the demonic things, and just this other one important thing that I'd went through. And you know, my family, as any other family would be, they were worried about me. Obviously, after telling people this, you know, they think that something bigger or a mental health crisis may be going on with you. And so, you know, they were worried. I was telling them, dude, this isn't it. This is bigger than that. Like, blah, 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 which it really was. Um, but they had, like, sent some of my other family over, like my grandparents and stuff, trying to talk to me. Like, they're worried about me. What the heck's going on? Blah, 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 right? And so, you know, I have mental health things that runs within genetically within my family and all that different stuff too, you know. So they were just worried that with maybe the drugs and stuff that I did, that I was having some sort of form of psychosis or whatever. It's understandable. Now, while yes, I was not in a good space spiritually and technically mentally, right? It's like I'm overwhelmed. I was depressed, right? I was anxious. There was a little bit of paranoia of what the frick is going on with my life, right? There was that problem, right? But not anything like some sort of schizophrenia or whatever, you know? Or psychosis. It wasn't like that. It was like I was releasing all the stuff that I held inside of me and just pouring it all on the table, and it was a little overwhelming for my family. So they were thinking like, man, maybe like he should go to the hospital, blah blah blah, like we're really worried, you know. And so after arguing about it and all this different stuff and everything, you know, we were just like, I just kind of surrendered at least to the fact of, okay, I'll just go there right now, check in with these doctors, and hopefully they'll like maybe be like, well, we think he's kind of okay, we'll just let him go. He doesn't have to like be at the hospital or anything like that. That's not how it played out. So before we had, I ended up going to the hospital, but I want to talk about 3 very important things that happened before it or during the process. So we get there, my parents are talking to people or whatever about what's going on with me. They're probably fears of things and wanting to check me and blah blah blah. I don't want to be at this place whatsoever. And I'm like scared of like, oh, you guys are gonna check me into like some sort of mental institution with people who do actually have like some pretty severe mental problems, you know. Like, I'm not going crazy. Like, I'm feared like I'm gonna get put into like strapped up, man, like sitting in a corner, you know. Like, I was scared, you know. I was like, this is reality, this is what's going on with me, like I just wanted to let you guys know it, and blah blah blah. So it was strange because I was refusing, not wanting to go, right? And what was weird was, I don't know how to explain it, of the feeling of it, but my mom, she just looked at me and she was just like, Miles, you need to be here. And I just felt like for some reason in that moment, first off, like the spirit in her, something was telling me, like, yeah, you need to be here. Like, just trust it. Somehow, like, I felt that, you know? And so I was just like, frick. I could tell, like, what was going on with that. Like, somehow felt that. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna check into this hospital. Like, what the heck, dude? This is insane. So I was like, alright, I'll check in here. So we go upstairs into this area, say goodbye to my parents, and I got to sign paperwork, right? I got to sign paperwork. And the crazy thing is that, all of a sudden I started praying to God as I'm like writing this paperwork. And the God that I'm thinking of is the God of the Bible, right? It's the Father, right? And it's the God that Jesus Christ talks about that is the true God, which is his Father, right? Before I continue on, side note, yes, I don't believe in the Trinity, okay? I'm glad that I don't believe in the Trinity. I believe God is the Father and Jesus Christ is his Son. He's the Son of God. So I was thinking about them, and then I'm writing on my thing, having to fill out stuff, and I'm like, man, God, where are you? I could tell, like, in this weird moment and all this stuff that I've been through, that this stuff is real now. So what the heck is going on? Like, where are you? This is all my thoughts. And I was in this lobby where I'm signing paperwork and stuff. It's a lobby. When I checked in there, you can end up going, just sitting in there chilling. You bring your food in there, blah, blah, blah. But nobody was in there. It was just me. And I was so in my head, I didn't even notice that there was like a TV on up in the hospital in the lobby room, right? I'm not listening to that whatsoever. I'm in my head. And I'm thinking all this, right? This is where it got interesting, too. All of a sudden, I hear, have faith, this is your sign. And I'm like, what? I just heard that. And I'm like, I thought somebody said it. Like, I thought I did hear them. Like, an audible voice from somewhere else, right? But it was something that was very different. It was the TV. It was very strange. I don't know how to explain it, but this show was on. It was actually Storage Wars, which is funny. But the dude on the TV, it was strange. He said, have faith, this is your sign, right? At that point. And I look up, and he's like pointing at this like carving of someone had like cut some wood that said faith, and it was like in red. And he points at it again. He's like looking at me. It was so strange. It was like God took control of the TV and was like making it to be like, no, this is your sign, like pay attention to this. And he said again, have faith, this is your sign. It was strange, dude. Very strange. I was like, dang. So, okay. The God of the Bible and the one that Jesus Christ is talking about and everything just related to it. I didn't know the things that I knew exactly yet. It has something to do clearly with them, That was who I called on, and all this different stuff about demonic things and all these feelings and this force that I had felt within, all of it was related, right? And this is how I knew, right? Some people might make an excuse like you just coincidentally just had some sort of little sign, or it was just coincidence that it was on TV. It's more than that, man. If you know, right, you know. This is how I knew it was a big deal, and what I believed in was very dangerous to the devil. This is how I know. So after that, right, I think I had like that night, it was like nighttime, pretty late, I would say. People were in bed already. I think I had like already requested, I was like, you know what, can I get a Bible? So I go in there, I'm reading what Jesus says, and there's that scripture that talks about, only those, the way like those who can come to me, talking about Jesus, is if my Father sends them, right? So in that moment, God, I believe he not only told me to have faith, but he gave me faith, and that faith then also too inevitably led me to Christ, to start understanding everything that was going on, right? So I think that night I was just reading, man, the Bible. And that was like a night of like me surrendering to God and Jesus in that moment. I felt like that moment was like my real moment of like the start of repentance, the start of my walk, the start of probably like receiving that Holy Spirit within me and starting to have a faith in everything. So this is where I knew like something big was going on, way more probably than usual for some people, I would say. The next day, there was a person in the patient who was a patient within this thing. So I'd stayed there for only 5 days, thank God. They had some good food though. I won't lie about that. It was actually really good. But I was just chilling, staying in my Bible during that 5 days. The next day, there was a person, a girl in there, probably somewhere within her mid-30s, maybe early 40s. I don't really know. But she was like, hey, can I talk to you real quick about something? I need to talk to you. I was like, okay. I was a little worried, I'm not going to lie, because I was like, you're a person that's like in here. I know that I'm in here, but I'm not sure who you are. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to technically be here, but I was in hindsight because of the signs and all this different stuff that I was given, but including this one, which was really important. It was strange what she told me, dude. So, there's two things that she told me. One of them I can't talk about, technically. But one of the things which was super weird was she said like she was my mother, but it wasn't only that. Like, she said my mother's like first name. And like, she was acting like she really did know me, and it was like really strange. She's like, yeah, I'm actually your mother, blank. This is me, like, blah, 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 you need to believe me. Like, we're all, like, it was so weird. But then she mentioned, it was crazy that she knew that. One, this girl was, I think, clearly under either demonic or the devil influence to, like, not get me to believe in really what was going on, of, like, this is a God and Jesus thing that I'm going through. And then they mentioned something else. It's something that like I said, that I can't really mention. It really is personally between me, God, and Jesus, and like some intimate people within my life. But she mentioned that thing too, and that's how I knew. I was like, yo, I'm like talking to a person right now who's being like clearly influenced, and you could like, I could see it on her that she was like under control of something else, like in that moment, like facial expression, like physically or physicality, you could tell like something is kind of influencing her in that moment. It was crazy, dude. And she said too, like at the end of it, she's like, you know, like if we need to get out of here, like out of this hospital place, so if you want, like meet me up at like this time, blah blah blah, and then we'll get out of here. That's like how she finished it. And obviously I didn't choose that, right? I didn't choose the way of like what I clearly really believe that the devil wanted me to go to, of like maybe getting me in trouble somehow. Like, I don't really know what the frick it was. I chose what I had faith in the situation of what God had told me, right? I reached out to him, he told me that. Something else reached out to me that wasn't them. Very clear. And what was strange was after that moment, it was like they never acted that way toward me. I don't even think I talked to them after that whole situation. It was a very, 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 very strange situation. So that's how I know, like, at least to me, like, my faith in what I have in was so important. I felt like Satan himself or the devil or demons or whatever, like, wanted to, like, approach me of, like, to get me, like, confused even more so. And they didn't. I surrendered my faith to God and Jesus just to keep going. So, let's fast forward some time, a little bit. So, after that, right, I still didn't actually stay clean. I didn't. Like I said, that was October of 2013. And I was still struggling with getting high and all that different stuff. And, but the thing was, is that even though, yes, everything that I went through, I realized like God and Jesus are real, and like I was like trying to read my Bible and put my faith into Him, but it was like still like I was like a mess, obviously. Um, but it helped me see a little bit more through reality and what was going on, and by putting my faith in them and trusting in, like, even with where I was at of like still getting high and kind of dealing with all the weird little stuff at times. Um, Eventually, like in 2014 of May or April, I ended up like going to treatment. And at that point, right, like you're in such a state when you have a problem with drugs where you could be back and forth about it. Like I didn't feel like when I first had gotten to treatment, like it's like you sometimes you feel like you have a problem, sometimes you don't, and it's just a wrestling back and forth of just being taken over by addiction. But I even view addiction as something spiritual that does affect you clearly. You know what I'm saying? So I had been given an ultimatum, like, oh, if I don't like fix things, like they're not gonna keep me on. I was on like depression meds or whatever at the time. Like the doctor's gonna take me off because I mean it made sense. It wasn't gonna work if you're like getting high and like doing all that stuff. But like my parents were gonna maybe kick me out, blah blah blah. And I was like, you know what? Fine, I'll go to treatment or whatever. And that was like even too the next step for me in my walk with God and Jesus. Of like one, it was like a real true break from all the craziness that had been going on within my life during that time, even more so than that like 5 day little like break from reality. um for I was there for like 30 days, and I was like really reading my Bible like almost every single day. And but then I also too at the same time was led by God and Jesus to recovery. And so when I first was there, like I didn't feel like I had a problem, but then when you clear the mind a little bit, you're away from all that stuff. I'm spending time in the Word, all that different stuff, praying to them, you know, seeds starting getting planted. I'm starting to relate to the people around me who do have problems, and like people who have been in and out of treatment a whole bunch and all that stuff. One of the weird things that like got me thinking, man, maybe I do have a problem, was actually having something called a using dream, where it's like you literally dream about getting high, and it was like very triggering. This is something that's not very uncommon. It's common within recovery when people talk about of like getting using dreams. Like when you wean yourself off of this stuff, you might have like a very triggering dream where like you get high or you're around it, and it makes you want to like do that kind of stuff and everything. It can be a triggering experience. And that was like my first time ever getting it, was when I was like in treatment. I was like, man, if I'm getting that and like people talked about it, like maybe I do have a problem. And so that seed was planted, right? And so when I got out, I actually got into a 12-step recovery program. And what that did for me was, at least for me, the starting steps of not only getting clean from drugs and alcohol, but cleaning everything on the inside of Miles that needs to be healed, that needs to be let go. And the major part of that process was relying on God and Jesus to be like the higher powers. They talk about higher powers within these programs, if they're a universal program for higher powers. It was starting to help me that I'm like surrendering over the things that they obviously have led me to, and so yeah, started going to meetings, got a person called a sponsor, started working on steps a little bit, worked on the first 3. I was going to meetings a ton, like 3 times a day. Didn't have a job. It's just getting to meetings, getting to meetings, and all that different stuff. Didn't really maybe tell myself like how I needed to. Eventually, wasn't really picking up the phone to talk to my sponsor, and didn't work on my steps, right? A lot of you who are in recovery, you've probably heard this story before, right? And after 7 months, I had 7 months clean. which was miraculous because I couldn't do that on my own. And even too, like, I was even at times trying to rely on God and Jesus, like, eventually to stop, but I couldn't. Part of their will for my life was to get into the program. It's very clear, it's very obvious for me, like, obviously in hindsight now. So, in 7 months, I went back out. I relapsed. And was out for like 3 months. And, yeah. What was crazy is that I was going through this weird experience that some people talk about, is that you sometimes when you start back up again and you're getting high, you hear the meetings and the things that we talk about in the meetings of like what it is to be an addict and all that different stuff, because I think that was one of my biggest things that I still couldn't fully surrender myself to, is that I actually had a problem with drugs and getting high and all that different stuff. And part of the excuse was my main drug of choice was weed, but it caused such a freaking problem with me, and it causes a lot of problems with people. They just don't want to talk about that in reality at the end of the day. Little side tangent, but I think weed is actually one of the most dangerous when it comes especially in recovery, because it's the drug that doesn't kill you, but I've seen a lot of people end up touching it, going back to their drug of choice, and I've seen a lot of people die. I know a lot of people who died in the program. So, anyways, I had went through those experiences of, like, I'm like hearing the meetings. It's like so strange. Like, I almost felt like I had these weird moments where it was actually almost like audible. Like, I could hear my sponsor actually at the time of like explaining different things in recovery and like the relation to it and like how you like know this is how you know you're an addict, blah blah blah. And after 3 months, I made another decision of like, man, I think I should quit. And you know, it was actually a couple days before my mom's birthday, and she was clearly then upset again, my family and stuff, that I'm back on doing this stuff, and I didn't want to hurt my mother either and everything. And you know, I remember my last day of like, I felt this pull when I was like, again, not the one like when I'm talking about in college, but just this pull of like, man, you're smelling this stuff, and it's like you just can't help yourself, just like being dragged to it, you know? There's nothing that you can do about it once you're caught up in it, man. And you felt, and I was like, I felt that kind of force, in a sense, kind of like the one back in the day that I was talking about with what happened to me in college. You felt the sin, that it was pulling you towards the thing that you know that you're not supposed to be going to. And I didn't want to feel that anymore. And my thing was too, was like, well, if I do this program that God and Jesus have led me to, and I only did it partially, I wasn't fully necessarily in it like how I needed to be, and I got 7 months. 7. This is a long time for a lot of us who are in recovery. But what's going to happen if I do it, like all of it? I do all the steps. I build a relationship with my sponsor. I still go to meetings, but I didn't build a fellowship with people then. I built a fellowship with some other people. I tell on myself if I'm feeling some type of way. I would make it a topic within the meetings, blah, blah, blah. If I do all of that, it's clear that God and Jesus led me to this. So what's going to happen? And I had faith. I was like, I think if I do this, I'm going to stay clean forever. You know? And so I did. I've done all that. And the reason why I've done all of that, or was able to do all of that, is because of who I put my faith into first and foremost. That's really all it comes down for me, is that my faith that I've expressed on here, that people have seen and maybe disagree with and all this different stuff, because I know that my faith is uncommon in a sense, because I think regular people sometimes have a similar faith as me, but as the standard theological, structural, doctrine understanding of people within church. But I believed in the God of the Bible, who is the Father, and I believed also too in His Son, and making both of them a part of my life, and to do the things of what was asked of me in this recovery program. And I'll tell you what, man, on the 19th of February, when this comes out, because I'm putting this out early because I'll be working on the 19th, but it'll come out on the 19th, but I'll have 10 years clean. So on February 19th of 2015, that was my clean date. I have 10 years. And life has not been some sort of resource extravagant prosperity type gospel thing. But dude, there's a lot of cleaning up. That the cup that was in me that was dirty and all this different stuff has been washed up. I feel joy, I feel happiness the natural way, the great way. I feel grateful. And most important, I know for a fact God is and who Jesus is in my life. I know who the real ones are. I know it. And for the important thing that I wasn't, maybe I express sometimes, I'm telling you, some of you may not believe me and think that it's impossible that out of all these years that the structural ideologies and the doctrine of the Trinity and all this stuff in your churches, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know what to tell you. You have to start really reading scripture and listening to what actually Jesus is. Like, really read through a Matthew. Really read through a Mark, a Luke, and a John. Really read through that and listen to what he says. You know, and you ask them. That was the thing too. I had to ask them. And they've given me a lot of knowledge and a lot of things to apply to my life. And it works. And the signs and the coincidences that I've had after the fact of confirmation of things and all this different stuff, like, I know that I have the real faith. For anyone who has had experiences, right? Because I've seen it obviously within social media, mainly obviously YouTube, with people saying they've had encounters with Jesus or maybe God, blah, 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 blah. Try to, if you've been somehow been given that blessing, all I can ask is you really, really, really need to get into scripture, try and understand who they really are, because it's a way bigger deal than what you think. A lot of people don't really know the reality of what big of a thing that we're in as the world, people, but as Christianity itself too. It's such a big thing that we've been kind of duped, in a sense. If you read, I believe it's 1 John 4, John talks about out of them there were people that really weren't of them, but they left the church or whatever. And if you start following some things within scripture, you realize it's almost like the people who have been raised up within Christianity, you know, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, all that different stuff, but even Protestant things. It was like he was talking about those exact people. I'll just say that. So if you're one of those people who have had this type of interaction, all I can really ask of you is really try and understand who God and Jesus is. It's a way bigger deal than what you think it is. Way bigger. I hope my message for all of you has been really important. I hope that it can lead you to the true faith. And yeah, probably after this, maybe right after this, or within a little time frame after, I'm going to make another video of discussing another important topic. But I hope that this has been a blessing for anybody who does hear this. I don't care who it is that you are, Christian, agnostic, atheist. And you know what? You may not 100% believe my story and think that's coincidence. Oh man, you have no idea, dude. You don't know what kind of situation this really is. It's way bigger with what we're going through. Way bigger. And the God of the Bible and his son, they are the ones. They are the real ones. So, you can have them in your life in ways in helping you out and strange coincidences and all this different stuff, more than what you really think, man. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. But yeah, I hope this is a blessing for everybody. To my brothers and sisters out there, I love you guys. Hope that you're doing well. Know that you're not alone. If this connects with you, awesome. Have a blessed one, you guys.